So this panel, I was always planned to do, so the pre-preparation will be stuck to the absolute letter on this one. And I think, and when we discuss this in the sort of preparatory call, my preconception is always the sort of contact center industry and CX industries tend to get the sort of, they sound like the most exciting. Looking in from an analyst on the outside, you hear about all the emerging technologies. So first of all, would you agree with that statement? And yes or no? And if so, what sort of emerging technologies do you think are most impacting? Anyone can take that. For Thomas, do you want to? Is CC the bastion of sort of emerging technology?
Is it the bastion of emerging technology? That's a good question. It's not the most glamorous place when you think about somewhere to work. No one says, I want to grow up to be a contact center agent. Unless, sorry if I offended anyone on here, that's really a rare thing to say, right? And essentially, a contact center takes complaints 24/7. So it's not glamorous at all. And some people are now beginning to call it a complaint center, Patrick. And then you add in the pandemic, and you're told, right, not only is it a tough job, go home and do it on your own. So then when the complaints come in, well, the agents are switching off. And that's disastrous for brands, because if you've got a switched off agent, surprise, surprise, rule 101 of humanity, they're not going to give good customer service. So roundabout answer to your question, what Five9 have said is we'll gamify their world, and we'll also bring in AI, which I think is a buzzword here, and everyone talks about it. 41% of our RFPs now, it's a main auxiliary point of reference. AI is coming in. So AI and gamification brings that career to a lot more of a, dare I say, exciting threshold, because gamification is what this generation live on. So they've suddenly got an avatar. The better job they do, the more coins they get. The more coins they get, I'm going to sound like Bruce Forsyth, it means prizes. Points mean prizes. And the most popular one, Patrick, is actually Fridays off. So they stay at work longer. The CIO is happy because 6 months extra for the agent in a high turnover industry. So long-winded answers. But that's
I think that's interesting because, I mean, I find it interesting, but effectively what you're focused on is making it more interesting for the agent, who's the person that's actually in it.
Yeah, absolutely. The person that's in it, and therefore giving that customer service to the end user, who then will go away, and the internet's a powerful thing. So a person leaves that interaction, they're either a promoter or they're going to be a detractor. So if you've given them a good interaction, they'll go and tell their friends and families, hey, listen, you want to be working with Aviva, they're a great insurance company. If they don't, well, they'll splash it, go on comparemymarket.com and say, don't go and buy from them. So it's a really interesting point in our industry right now.
Yep, absolutely. Geordie, voice is obviously Verbio's area of expertise. Do you sort of agree that the customer experience space is sort of a good one for emerging technology? And I know that's something you've been exploring a lot.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you're defining exciting, if you're exciting referring to, for example, making the number of the bottom line of the P&L the bigger the best, I think it's exciting.
Sounds exciting to me.
Exciting, right. That usually sounds exciting. I mean, yeah, eventually it's about customer loyalty, it's about customer retention, it's about improving customer experience just to get those loyal customers and to increase and upsell and cross-sell and all that things. Customers, there was an interesting research that you launched last year on November that we're talking about, and it's just linked to what Thomas was pointing out. About 50% of the contact centers lost like a third of the agents
agent churn
last year. So again, if you don't have agents, how do you deal with customers? Another point is that the customer is getting more and more demanding. It's getting more and more demanding. I really like the presentation of the Gen Z and all that stuff, and it's true, and they are getting demanding. I mean, for example, that generation, that was not referred into the presentation, that generation is getting, they are really keen onto the self-service thing.
Yeah.
So for example, it doesn't mean that they don't want to use the phone to make a phone call, but maybe they prefer not having to wait on the line for being served, or maybe they prefer being self-served. So I don't want to speak to anyone. I just want to handle that my own. I don't want to speak to an agent, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put those technologies to just for example, to automate processes, which is improving customer experience because you're reducing waiting times. If you're putting the technology just, for example, to identify any issues real time on a call because you have identified for the transcription and the word spotting, the speech analytics, that something is going wrong into that conversation, you can jump up into that. If you can use the technology, for example, to predict behaviors or outcomes that will come from the conversations that are happening to the contact center, what you're basically doing is improving the customer experience, which will improve your number at the bottom of the P&L. So yes, I think that technologies and customer experience and contact centers are the main ones where you have to put those technologies in place because they are at the forefront of that bottom line there. It's the end user dealing with it. It's the end user who's going to upsell, cross-sell, because the customer experience has been.
Yeah, that's the foundation of the numbers, effectively, in the business. Hayden, from your point, broad.
Yeah, look, from our perspective, we're lucky enough to be spanning both the CCaaS and the UCaaS software product development space, and it's absolutely clear from our product roadmap perspective that those things that we've done in the call centres maybe 5 or 6, 7, 8 years ago, the demands being placed on service providers, for example, is that they need to make that same experience available on all channels, maybe in places where it's not a structured call centre environment. So the domains of retail, where there are phones, where there is a UCaaS environment, in government departments, the service provider needs to take those demands that have been solved in a call centre construct, the technologies being used in call centres, and make those available more broadly across multiple channels, in not just omnichannel as in terms of chat interactions and the like, but being able to put the same call centre technologies into non-call centre environments. And we can see significant demands being placed on service providers to be able to do both nowadays, not just the domain of a call centre environment, but both.
Okay. In terms of, and again, I've sort of gone at this from a selfish analyst perspective, where I hear about the emerging technologies, and you've provided some examples with sort of gamification and across the board. How heavily penetrated, how highly adopted are these sort of emerging technology, whether it be AI, whatever it might be, within enterprise provision of contact center customer experience solutions? Because generally the customer experience I receive, and I don't know about the audience on a sort of day-to-day basis, I would describe as poor. So I'm just wondering, how far do you think those emerging technologies are penetrated, and how quickly is that going to improve sort of general customer service? Anyway, Hayden, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking this kind of session could be a lot about the bingo words of artificial intelligence.
I'm trying to hit as many as I can.
So let's go through the bingo check. I think artificial intelligence is a sensational opportunity for businesses to be able to take decisions away from those in environments like staff members who may not be capable of making the decisions to say remain compliant in a security sense. So we're seeing a significant need to increase compliance levels in the way staff are interacting with customers, and we think that technologies like artificial intelligence can kind of take that decision-making process away from staff who not necessarily able to comply, and allow the business to remain compliant in their interactions with their customers. The actual uptake of that, from our perspective, we're seeing is very, very low, and there's a huge opportunity for business to embrace, to take the predictions that artificial intelligence can promise, and to use those predictions to allow a business to remove the decision from a human who may well be compromising the business's ability to be, let's say, PCI compliant, when in fact taking credit card details from customers, for example, and using artificial intelligence to predict the moments by which these sorts of sensitive transactions are to occur, and to remove that decision from the individual and elevate it up into a sort of an automated process. That's our hope, to allow businesses to increase their level of compliance in these sorts of tricky areas. But the penetration, the adoption is significantly low, but that's the opportunity for service providers to take ownership of, I think.
And Thomas, from the sort of 5.9 perspective, obviously the platform utilises lots of emerging technologies. Does it vary in terms of the uptake and the utilisation by organisations that deploy contact centres?
Yes, it does. And I think I'll answer it by looking at the agent first, Patrick, as I said, but also from the consumer's point of view. Now, at the risk of offending anyone, I just want to make sure, anyone here actually worked in a contact centre? I'm curious. Who's been an agent before? There's a handful of people there who...
Outbound, though.
Outbound. But, you know, to your point, there's not many great experiences, and people are still...
No, it was awful, and I was terrible at it.
Still frustrated by it. What's going to change that? Well, I said from an agent's point of view, if you can change their world, that's step one. The A in I is artificial, it does say that, but I think where it's more powerfully used is augmenting for the agent to then do a better job. That's where we're seeing from 5.9's point of view. They're empowered and have a lot more analytics next to them to then give what only humans can do still, which is empathy. That's something that I think, so far anyway, robots haven't been able to do, is that empathetic, but equipping them with augmented intelligence is the first thing I would say. But also, what's really improved, and how I'd answer your question by saying, are we going to see, we recently have integrated with OpenAI's ChatGPT, everyone's familiar with that, hopefully, and our IVA platform, Agent Assist. What we're now seeing is actually the natural language, the NLP, has improved vastly.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm seeing, and I'll give you a use case from my point of view, but for us, Pizza Hut are trialing it right now in Australia. So they're taking their calls from call to warm pizza arriving in someone's house, all through natural language and AI. And when surveyed, only 73% of the people didn't realize they hadn't spoken to a human.
Oh, really? Wow.
So it's like, well, that's a phenomenal data point to look at. And I think they're going to roll it out across Europe is the plan, because it was so successful in that you've suddenly got an interaction where it's right there and it's enabling warm pizzas to come at home without even a human being involved. That's in Australia. My one recently, my car broke down, and I didn't know, being an Aviva user, whether it was a punctured tire. So I'm on the side of a motorway, and I'd called in, and immediately you were given a press 1 for recovery, but I don't know if I have recovery in my scheme. So as soon as that came, it said, please, could you, you're familiar with this, what do you want? And so you want to automatically just speak to human. I'm of that generation, but I gave it a go.
Spam the dialogue.
Do I have recovery? Does my flat tire, are you going to, a little bit of a stressy point for me there. Do I have recovery was essentially the message. And immediately it was routed to an agent. He said, Mr. John, where are you? You are covered. Can you send me a Google map of where you are? Pin it to me over. Within half an hour, I had someone by my side. So Patrick, to your point, there's a use case there where we hopefully will turn a corner and get to better.
Yeah, those are two really interesting use cases, and one that's obviously a personal one. And Geordie, from your side, are you seeing the uptake more? I think as I said, from a selfish perspective, I think the sort of acceleration of customer service could be faster. And I'm desperate for everyone to say, very soon. But Geordie, from your...
I think this is still a long way to go. Yeah. I mean, that's reality. That's a brutal reality. I'm happy for that. It means we have lots of business to do yet. But, I mean, I'm still amazed on calling to a call center, having to dial numbers, for example, press 1, press 2, having to navigate through a tedious menu when you realize on the first dialing number that, it was wrong. It was the other one. I have to start over again. Yeah. I still am amazed on having to remember passwords, secret questions, and things like that when you can be perfectly, quickly, straightforward identify with voice biometrics. So there's plenty. There's lots of things that can be done yet. I also understand that from our client's point of view, it's not that easy. And I also understand, I feel that as well. I understand, I hear them. The business case needs to make sense. And we are brutally honest with our clients usually, because deploying this kind of technologies, AI, is not that straightforward. I mean, you have to have someone, some vendor, some partner to work with to make sure that once that's deployed and you've gone through the whole process, it's a success. But I mean, there's plenty out there of technologies and really simple use cases and really simple the engines and solutions that can just give you a boost in terms of customer experience. I'm amazed sometimes on the that there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, I would agree with that from my general experience of customer experience within the UK. Geordie and Thomas, actually, you mentioned sort of aspects of this, but I wanted to come on to it. We heard from C Squared earlier on, the generational presentation about, and interestingly, Geordie, one of the things we will look at in the future is generational requirements for communicating with the business, which we didn't in this study, but I thought the results were so good that we will definitely look at that in the future. From your perspective, and Hayden, I'll come to you first, how do you see end customer requirements changing in terms of their communication preferences with the business, and how's this going to impact yourselves and service providers and telcos in the audience?
Yeah, great question. I think given this is a cloud communications and service provider kind of forum, I think some of the technologies that, we talk about artificial intelligence, for example, as something that is underutilised. It really got to find a home in terms of how service providers harness the capabilities for their customers' businesses. We're API guys, and we like to manipulate APIs and to consume APIs of the service provider environment. And we think that, to be frankly honest, a lot of the capabilities that are on service provider networks that businesses consume are significantly underutilised. And we think there's an opportunity to combine the programmability of service provider clouds, the APIs that exist inside the networks, to kind of predict what the expectations are of the customer in near real time, if you like, or to use at least technologies like artificial intelligence to predict how the network should be configured based on the customer's context, if you like. So being able to use the combination of insights and analytics and predictions that are the promise of artificial intelligence technology, but map that to the way in which a service provider's comms cloud could be or should be configured at that moment to best serve the subscriber, the end user.
And it's actually about the capability within the network of doing that.
Yeah, totally underutilised. I'd love the opportunity to help service providers double the consumption of their features, which their customers are purchasing, but not necessarily using, and maybe using technologies like artificial intelligence to predict the way in which, based on the end user's location, time of day, all the data points that artificial intelligence promises can infer context to drive the network's behaviour. And I think a lot of that generational analysis talks to subscribers wanting the network to be smart and to react and to respond in real time with the features they're already given, but to be automated and to present themselves to best suit the subscriber at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Geordie, you mentioned before, generational requirement, much more likely to use sort of instant communication mediums, maybe. I think the use of, app store integrations across iOS and Google is generally the first point of call, although I don't have it backed up by data, but we will look at it in the future. Is that what you see majorly influencing in terms of sort of generational requirements for?
Yeah, I think with the new generations, I mean, all the omnichannel is going to be, and it's not only it's being smart as well. So as he was saying, regarding the predicting, just foreseeing what's going to happen before it's happening and being able to provide that beforehand, just go ahead of what the user is expecting, and all the omnichannel thing. It's going to be the main point here, and I think that service providers will have to be aware of that and prepare for that. So I am engaging with the service provider with the text, and I want to just switch to the phone, and I want to have all that previous context already there, so I don't have to repeat myself again. So I think omnichannel and all the predictability, it's going to be the main focus.
Actually, the not repeating yourself is a personal bone of contact. That context when you contact any customer service organisation, the context transfer, I think, is key. That is something that I'm fed up of doing, is repeating whatever I just said to the previous people. Thomas, from Five9's perspective, you're quite a young organisation, effectively. What are you seeing in terms of, what are you preparing for in the future in terms of how the sort of different generations might want to communicate with an organisation going through a Five9 contact centre?
Yeah, great question. And we're about to announce soon one of the world's largest service provider reselling our product, Five9 Patrick. And we asked this question. In fact, William's in this room. William will be leading that said SP out go-to-market. So buy him a beer and he'll tell you who it is. But we asked them the question, what is the predominantly still the major channel? And I want to use a term that Geordie mentioned here, omnichannel. We've seen this term evolve. It was first called, if you remember, multi-channel. Then it's become omnichannel. When we asked this service provider, they said voice is still king. Voice is still around about 50% of the choice. And then when they broke it down into a generational aspect, Patrick, to your point, the younger generation are heavily leaning towards self-service, digital, for the very reason you just said, which is, look, I've typed in my username, I've typed it, it's all there, so it's kind of recordable, and they feel their resolution is quicker through self-service. But then you've got the whole, and I feel sorry for the end users here, because you have to cater for every single channel. You now have, I mean, some generations out there, not me, I'm too old rather, they want to TikTok their way into a contact center. But then you've got dinosaurs like myself who want to use voice too, you want to speak. Then you've got WhatsApp, SMS, you've got, and we're coining a new phrase, opti-channel. So the reason why we're saying opti-channel, it hasn't started trending on Twitter yet, optimal for the said generation at the said time. So if you're in a bus, at the back of a bus, you're not going to call the contact center about the rash you found to Boots contact center. That's not going to happen. You want to text probably. And if you want, it depends on where you are and what generation you are. Therefore, opti-channel is a term that's being shouted out as optimal. But of course, to do that, as brands, they have to offer the whole plethora menu to the end user.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, we did some research on that, and even trying to map out the amount of options we had to give respondents in terms of what communication channels do you want to use is incredibly difficult, because, you know, how many do we include, let alone how many do they select? Aidan, you were going to come in.
I was just going to comment on the context piece, and the best providers of context are service providers. You know, they kind of have the end user with a mobile phone in their pocket, and from that you can glean a lot of information. And what we know about certain generations is their willingness to offer information freely, and for that information to be used as a data point for, and the service provider's network fundamentally be capitalised upon to help call centre operators understand context to drive an opti-channel interaction, in effect. And I think that's a key thing in the context of this forum and service providers. That's the sort of value that we hope that they can leverage, is creating context to drive adaptive behaviours of the way in which contact centres respond to different generational requirements in real time. That's the hope and the plan.
There was a couple of other pieces I wanted to sort of pick up on. I've been asking a lot about contact centre platforms, obviously, and customer experience, but we often isolate customer service provision, customer experience provision to the contact centre. That's not necessarily the right approach. And secondly, again, we couldn't do this panel without talking about sort of CPaaS and embedded communication capabilities. Do you see, each of you, first of all, enterprises taking a more holistic approach to customer experience provision generally, not just combining it into the contact centre, but sort of everyone in the organisation is an agent, as I've heard the phrase before? And are they using different communications capabilities and embedding them in particular workflows, using maybe communication mediums from other places? Are you seeing approaches in sort of either of those areas, Thomas?
Yeah, we are. And just a little 30-second story to just the first part of your question about who's responsible for customer service in a business. The owner of Wynn, you know, one of these big Las Vegas hotels, the Wynn, Bellagio, the chain. He was asked, he was doing one of these summit panels like this, by the way, but they opened up to a Q&A, and a lady stood up and said, who is the most important person or employee in your company? And it really struck him, it challenged him, because he didn't expect that question, number one. But within about, he said, give 30 seconds to reflect, and then he said, it's probably the bellboy right now, because that's the next person that's going to interact with a customer. That becomes the most important person in my business at that given moment in time. So the message he was trying to relay then, of course, if you think of the contact center, you're always interacting with the customer. But from a hotelier's point of view, he's saying the very next person who deals with a customer is the most important person in my business. And to your point, we're looking at a situation here where that is key. So that's the first thing I would say. What was the first? Sorry, could you repeat this?
And the second point was, I sort of bundled two questions into one for the idea of economy, was whether you were seeing organisations use CPaaS capabilities to improve their customer experience provision in terms of embedded comms.
Yeah, to your point, and Microsoft Teams and Zoom are in the back office. So if an agent has a question and they want to suddenly speak to someone else, it could be a billing question, where you then need to see the presence of somebody in finance, and having that integration into the contact center, Patrick, is key to a first call resolution. So suddenly with the integration of, and I've just mentioned two there because, you know, Zoom, some of you may not know or may know, tried to buy Five9 during the pandemic. They slapped $14 billion on the table and said, we want to buy you, because they saw the power of a contact center and UC working together. We said no to Eric Wan. I want to make that for the record. But because we want to remain agnostic, right? We want to say we work with every single, to your point, Hayden, every single UC provider, because whatever the consumer is using in the back office needs to be integrated to the contact center to provide a holistic first call resolution.
Julie?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you two examples of, yes, that's happening. It's going across the whole organization. It's not just staying within the contact center. For example, we're seeing more and more into conversations on deploying speech technologies on contact centers. The marketing department with the IT department of or the head of contact center department, for saying, just asking for things like, okay, you're gonna put in place a voice virtual assistant. That's right, but what about the voice that it's gonna be prompting and it's going to be speaking there? I mean, we have our brand guidelines that drives into a brand persona that we have to make sure that the technology in the voice, the synthesized voice that's going to be behind that, it needs to be completely aligned with the marketing guidelines. I mean, it needs to match. Another one is when we're deploying, for example, agencies. So we were sitting there behind the contact center with the agent, just listening. The technology is listening to the whole conversation between the agent and the customer. And when the customer is asking about, for example, bills, I have an issue with my bill, that needs to be completely integrated with the financials and the system there on the finance department to make sure that the agent has that bill just prompted quickly. So he doesn't not have to look for that. So it comes back, it pops up immediately. So yeah, you're seeing that customer experience issue is not isolated just within the contact center, and it's more and more going across the whole organization.
Yeah, Hayden?
Yeah, I'll share another example if I may. We operate a PCI compliance cloud that helps call centers remain compliant, but we're also noticing a drive to help that same business deliver uniformity across other channels of interaction. More broadly, let's say they're retail points of sale. So how do we deliver a consistent experience in maybe the 60 shop fronts across the country that's not in a structured environment of a call center, but how do you create a user experience that's very consistent and meets the expectations across both of those channels and kind of raises the level of the organisation as a whole, their level of compliance. And you can't use the same technologies. You can't deploy a call center solution into 60 retail outlets, if you like. But how do you deliver the same level of uniformity? And that requires not necessarily call center-based solutions, but maybe more kind of CPaaS-based solutions that are integrated into unified comms. So we kind of see these mashups happening that allows a business to deliver the same level of compliance across all channels and do it in a very consistent way, but most importantly, an economical way, because not all technologies scale equally into different sort of delivery models, if you like, across a business's channels.
Excellent. And just sort of a final question for each of you. We've talked about all various examples of emerging technologies. I wanted to understand which you think is going to be the most disruptive, and I'm assuming potentially AI across the board. And in what sense do you think it is going to disrupt? Who's it going to disrupt? Is it agents? Is it customers? Whereabouts do you see that fitting? Hayden, do you want to come in on that first? And again, don't have to pick AI, anything. I know on the network side there's some. What do you think is most disruptive? CPaaS, any of those?
For us, again, in the context of a service provider
I think
community here, I think for us it's the ability to harness the power of the network API that exists inside the network today, and to build use cases that allow businesses to be more efficient, to be more productive using those APIs. So the most disruptive technology, I guess we're going to have to go with the bingo sort of AI piece, but I think importantly it's about shifting intelligent decision support systems, about allowing the decision to be sometimes taken away from what was once done by a human intelligence into an artificial intelligence, and using that as an augmented experience, not just in contact centres but also in business communications. And so I'll vote AI as an augmentation to kind of move the decision logic away from a human who may be be compromising a business or compromising their compliance, and moving that into something that becomes kind of a non-discretionary thing.
And I've definitely heard before within networking technology that often, in terms of security anyway, the biggest weakness is the soft squishy bit, which tends to be the person rather than any aspect of the network. Geordie, in terms of sort of disruption?
I think it's everything. It's down to AI for me. It's an ape. But the point is not AI is just a tool. It's just a tool.
Yeah.
So it's like with ChatGPT and all those things. I mean, it's the way it's putting AI to work for the service provider, the enterprise, final profit and use case. Yeah. So you can have the most sophisticated engine based on AI. If that is not completely tuned and customized to a specific use case and need of that service provider, it's useless. It's completely pointless. So for me, it's AI, but it's more on having the ability and having the skills on putting that AI to work and making sense for that specific use case of that service provider. And for me, that's a difficult thing. AI is out there. I mean, it's already available. I mean, ChatGPT, I mean, they've opened that to everyone. What do you do with that is the point. I mean, it's not about inventing the wheel. I mean, the wheel is there, but you can do many things with a wheel. You can do a car, you can do a bicycle, you can use a mill for just moving water and taking the energy in a mill.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a good analogy.
it's about how do you use that? How do you make the use of that tool? And for me, that's a breakthrough.
Yeah, the context and application of it are obviously key. Thomas, final word to you, 5-9.
Yeah, well, first I want to say thank you, Patrick, for having us. I didn't say that outright.
Pleasure.
You're brilliant at what you do. I'm sure everyone agrees here.
Well, thank you, and they can fill out the survey at the end of the event.
Net promoter score for Patrick. Get it up, guys.
I mean,
NPS. Yeah, round of applause. I think it is.
While Matt's not in here, we are all scored, and it would be great to beat Matt. So, that's just... But thank you, Thomas.
No, you got it. Just a quick one. Does everyone know what ChatGPT, have you heard of OpenAI? Just hands up. I just want to know if it's just my household. Thought so. Look, this is...
We're all nerds here.
Everybody knows about this stuff. And some of its stuff is frightening. I'm hearing university dissertations being done by ChatGPT. I feel sorry for the invigilators at uni now because each one is unique. How do you invigilate that? Now, this is frightening to one element, but if integrated correctly to your point there, Geordie, it could be the radical pivot point, which does happen in every industry. You do see that, right? And so there's been buzzwords for a long time. Machine learning, ML. You've had RPA, robot process automation. And now we've got AI, and everybody just seems it's like invasion of the robots. But essentially, it is going to change things, and particularly in and I'm coached not to say the R word, so economically challenging times in a macro environment. When a contact center wants to bring down the operational costs, I just told you, Pizza Hut can have A to Z done just through AI. That's not going to necessarily mean redundancies for everyone, because hopefully in other industries they'll say, hang on a minute, the AI can do that boring, repetitive part, and the humans can continue to. So you get a cut in costs. But to your point and to the question's point, could be the most disruptive element, certainly within the contact center, Patrick.
Really fascinating discussion here. I'd like to thank all of my panelists, Thomas John from 5.9, Julie Torres Gomez from Verbio, and Hayden from Broadsource. Thank you to all my panelists. Round of applause. Thank you very much, guys. You can leave your mics there.